It is now time for us to talk about our main event of the evening, and we go into the welterweight division. And as we mentioned before, it is a rare occasion when it comes to the UFC. Outside of Conor McGregor and the Diaz brothers, the last time that the UFC did a pay-per-view non-title main event, Dan Henderson versus Rashad Evans, UFC 161. It's happening once again. It's Colby Covington taking on Jorge Masvidal. Colby is a big bookmaker's favourite for this one. You can get him at minus 335 with DraftKings. Jorge Masvidal comes in at plus 260. Now, the big question that a lot of people want to bring up first and foremost, John, is a lot has been made of the fact that this is a pay-per-view main event. Does it deserve to be one?
Yes, for sure. I think that there's both these guys are well known enough. Jorge definitely has a lot of popularity behind him. Um, and there's a legitimate good storyline behind this fight. I mean, I think a lot of times the storylines in title fights or main events are extremely forced. Like the Cyril versus Ngannou, I didn't find that extremely compelling. I get with the whole coach thing and whatnot, but these guys like legitimately were good friends. Now they don't like each other. If you haven't seen it, look up the video of Jorge and Colby wrestling on Thanksgiving or something like that. These guys are like lived in an apartment together and they wrestle around their apartment for like 20 minutes straight. There's shit all over the apartment, just all this stuff. It looks like they just moved in, and these crazy motherfuckers are wrestling one another around in the apartment like it's a full MMA practice. I mean, it's a great video. And I think Jorge was in Colby's corner for the RDA fight when he won his interim championship. Like these guys were legitimately like best friends at one point. And they went their separate ways back in 2019. They had personal disputes, some disputes over their coach. They used to train at the same gym. They split gyms. So I mean, this is a really good storyline. I think that like it could, if you watch a promo that the UFC puts together about these guys, I feel like it could be actually like a compelling story that makes people want to tune in.
I'm in a very similar sort of boat to you. I think it does deserve to be a pay-per-view main event. I was looking through some of the sort of like recent title fights that the UFC have done and some of the title fights that they got planned now. And I think Colby versus Masvidal could do far better numbers instead. It's going to do better numbers than Volkanovski versus Zombie. Probably do better numbers than Gaethje versus Charles Oliveira. The one thing that the naysayers will say though is both of these guys are coming off losses to the same guy. And if you actually go back through the figures, they have only had 2 wins between them in the past 2.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely both Kamaru Usman's sons, no doubt about that. Kamaru, beat both their asses both times. Um, but yeah, I'm sure they're both extremely grateful to be fighting a guy besides Kamaru Usman for a change. But I think you can really be skeptical about Colby Covington's run that he's been on. I mean, if you look at like some of his past wins, Tyron Woodley, not impressive at all. Robbie Lawler far past his prime, and he did beat Lawler bell to bell, but so did RDA. So did uh, Neil Magny. A lot of guys have been beaten up on Lawler lately, this late in his career. And then Colby, his best win is a very marginal decision over RDA. A lot of people, my good friend Sriram still stands to this day that RDA won that fight. And it sounds crazy to some people, but it sounded crazy to me at first time. But you go back and watch it, and Colby, he gets a takedown. He doesn't do anything with it. Colby or RDA stands up. RDA knees him in the stomach. He separates. Colby gets a takedown. He doesn't do anything with it. I mean, Colby wrestles and has a crazy pace and has great wrestling, but once he gets the fight to the floor, he doesn't do a whole lot of damage. He land a lot of ground and pound. He doesn't attack submissions, and the guy's kind of a crotch sniffer at times. He wrestles hard for the entire time. He's got incredible cardio, incredible output, but I just don't think the guy does damage that much. He doesn't look to hurt his opponents. While Jorge is a very damaging fighter. I mean, he knocks dudes stiff. Asked Darren Till, Ben Askren about that. He beat the shit out of Nate Diaz. Made that look fairly easy in that fight. And I think Masvidal is just a much harder hitter, the much more damaging fighter. And I mean, the odds for this fight are crazy, in my opinion. I mean, we got Colby Covington as a minus 350 favorite, Jorge Masvidal almost a plus 300 underdog. I think the people are disrespecting Jorge Masvidal. I mean, I kind of been thinking about this way about all the underdogs. I think all the underdogs. Actually, no, I'd say Spivak and Mitchell are fine, and then RDA and Masvidal are the value underdogs. So, what are you thinking about how these two match up?
I think a lot of it might be weighted into how both performed against Kamaru Usman, because both times, especially the first time when it came to Colby, Colby gave Kamaru Usman a lot of trouble, especially in that first fight. And I even saw people in the second fight trying to make some sort of argument that Colby won that. I personally thought it was 4-1 to Usman to win that. And yet with Masvidal, it was 5-round domination, first time round, and then second time around, big highlight reel knockout, which put Masvidal out. I think that's only I think I read somewhere, 50 fights Jorge Masvidal has had, and that's only the fourth time he's been finished, which I think that tells you everything you need to know in regards to how big of an achievement that was for Kamaru Usman to finish that fight. I think that Masvidal does have some strengths behind him. I think his takedown defense on the whole is very good. And even the second time around, I think Kamaru only landed the one takedown in that second fight, and Masvidal was pretty much straight afterwards. So I think his grappling is a lot better than people give it credit for. But the thing with Colby is it's that pace. It's that pace and that striking style. It's not the flashiest. It's a bit sloppy, but it's constant output. He, quite appropriately, considering Colby, it's an annoying striking style. It's just shot, 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 shot. And nobody can get the chance to build up some momentum. We saw that when Robbie Lawler fought him. And I can see him frustrating Masvidal in the same way. And Masvidal's just not going to be able to get his striking game going because Colby's just constantly on him all the time.
Yeah. So starting at distance, I think that you got to give Masvidal the advantage at distance.
Yes.
I don't think anybody would really dispute that. Colby's going to be pumping out that volume like he does, but that's going to give opportunities to be countered. And there's no doubt about it that Jorge is the harder puncher. He's a very skilled kicker as well, very underrated kicking game. So at distance, striking range, Masvidal is going to be landing the better shots, and he's going to be winning the fight at that range. So then you have to be very, very confident that Colby is going to get it into the clinch, get it into the wrestling over and over again, and then you have to be confident that he's going to keep it there for 3-4 minutes around. Because I could see scenarios where Colby gets a takedown, controls him for 2 minutes, but then they get back to distance, and Masvidal lands a few punches, and then that kind of could swing the round right back. I mean, like I was mentioning, Colby doesn't do a whole lot of damage, doesn't land a lot of ground and pound. So when he gets these takedowns, he doesn't do a whole lot with them. So I could see him getting takedowns for the first few minutes of a round. Then Jorge works his way back up to the feet, gets back to range, lands a knee or an elbow on the breaks, lands a few punches, lands a kick at the end of the round. And then the round becomes really, really close all of a sudden, because Masvidal is doing the most damage. You guys got to remember that. The scoring criteria says damage is the number one factor. It's above effective grappling. It's above controlling a person against a cage. It's all about damage. So if Jorge can just find some small opportunities to land damage, I think he could really swing these rounds back in his favor. And I think this one is, extremely likely to go the distance. It is favored at minus 142 to go the distance. I mean, I think if anyone is finishing the fight, it's going to be Masvidal via knockout. But I mean, Colby is pretty tough too. I mean, it took a sustained beating for Usman to finish him. He got dropped by Usman and fought his way back. So I think this one is going to be hitting the scorecards for sure. And I think it's going to be a 48-47 on either side. I could see it being really similar to the RDA fight where RDA, I was just describing it again. But RDA lands a strike at distance, gets taken down, gets back up, lands some strikes in the clinch, and then the rounds are really 50-50. And, I just don't think that Covington is as damaging of a fighter as you want him to be betting him at, 75, 78% here. So I like Masvidal as the underdog here, and I think he's got a great chance to win straight up.
One of the things I have noticed about Jorge Masvidal, especially during this whole sort of Street Jesus career reinvention, is Masvidal has always been a fantastic technical striker, probably one of the best jabs in the sport. But one of the things I noticed when he came back into action against Darren Till, and as we've seen for the rest of his fights, he has been a lot more aggressive. He's started to sort of mix that sort of technical prowess and be a lot more come forward. It's mixing the brawler, the street fighter, with the technician. He needs to do the same thing in this fight, because if he allows Colby to start pressing the pace and be the one to dictate where the fight's going, he's not going to win this fight whatsoever. He needs to be the aggressor. He needs to put the pressure on Colby. And whether or not that causes sort of like long-term effects later on in the fight, I think it's a chance he needs to take.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I was just kind of looking at, Masvidal I feel like he's always the underdog. And, looking back, in his past 8 or 9 fights, he was only favored one time to Nate Diaz. He was a dog to Usman both times, to Askren, he was underdog. Till underdog. Stephen Thompson, Damian Maya, underdog to all these guys. I feel like he's always in a tough matchup, but he typically overperforms those expectations of him being the underdog too. So I just think that this could be another example of that, of him being underrated by the market here. And I think that people are a bit crazy for betting Colby Covington as over a 3-1 favorite. I don't see that as a good bet at all. So I'll be cheering for Jorge to get this one done for sure.
Do you think maybe a lot of that is down to the amount of fights that they've had, and especially the number of losses? I think that a lot of the sort of punters are a big reason that dictate all of these sort of betting odds. And we've seen a lot of times that you can have a fighter who has that sort of zero next to the name, and I find that the punters always give them more leeway than what they normally do. Do you think that's maybe just some people? Do you think there's maybe people out there that see that 15 next to Jorge and maybe don't give him the credit because of that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are we call them like quantitative bettors, where they look at stats, they look at numbers, they look at records, and then they bet based on that. But there's so much more to fighting besides that. It's a qualitative game. You have to look at how the fights really went. You have to watch the footage. For example, I mean, this'll already be the fight have already happened by the time this gets released. But look at Bobby Green tonight as a 6-1 underdog against Islam Makhachev. People are putting so much stock into Green having 10 losses, and Islam being 21-1, and Khabib's prodigy and whatnot. But Bobby Green is an extremely defensive grappler. He's a great fighter everywhere, and Bobby Green's pulling off this upset and is going to beat Islam Makhachev. We recorded this before the fight happened, by the way. It's 3 p.m. It's 3 p.m. on a Saturday. So when you guys watch this tomorrow, throughout the week, just be like, damn, that guy was right about Bobby Green pulling off the upset. So. I like I said, once again, I like Masvidal as a bet here, 3-1 underdog. I'm happy to put my money on him at that price.
Yep. Jorge Masvidal is 37 years old now, and he's coming off 2 straight losses, both to the same guy, Kamaru Usman. Now, Jorge Masvidal was the sort of like the big sort of flavor of the month in the MMA world. He was the BMF champion, he was Street Jesus, and he ended up being legitimately one of the sport's biggest stars. Can he still be a big star if he loses to Colby? Or is that the end of the sort of Masvidal hype, as it were?
2 words. Jake Paul. I think win or lose, he's fighting Jake Paul after this. And I mean, I don't know what his UFC contract is like or whatnot. But I would, if I were him, I would do everything in my power to box Jake Paul, because that's a big money fight right there. He can make $10 million boxing Jake Paul in this next calendar year if he wants to. So I hope he does that. That would be fun to see.